Hello guys, this is the Daily Hoof. If you love horses, or you're learning about horse care, you're in the right place. Today we're focusing on something every horse owner or handler needs to know, hoof cleaning. So let's head over to the barn and get started.
Dois, né? Um pedaço quebrado que dobrou. Casco rachado, às vezes entra uma sujeira ali, um pedacinho de pau aqui no meio. É um animal que fica a campo. Então acompanha esse casqueamento, essa transformação aí. O tempo tá bem seco, né, Renato? Faz dia que não chove. O casco tende a ficar mais ressecado, mais duro aí que o Renato tá cortando. Só lembrando que os animais aqui, todos bem cuidados. Tem animais aí que o casco cresce um pouco mais rápido que o outro. Então, todos os animais aqui são casqueados. só a diferença que vai dando aí, ó. Outro quebrado ali também. Vocês vão ver também a transformação dele. Vamos ver como que vai ficar. Vamos lá então, o Renato já vai estar fazendo. De trás aqui também já está com as pontinhas quebradas.
So how do I spot the problems on these hooves? Well, I look at the top first in the white line, I look down toward the toe triangle on either side, and I also check that typical sole ulcer site. That's where the majority of those problems are going to be. That white line looks good there, but there, I think that's going to be the problem. If we move over to the other side, we got the sole ulcer site looks good. The white line on the other side, that looks good as well. I'd say, yeah, definitely it's going to be over here. Okay, but how did you eliminate that other claw? How were you sure it wasn't over there? Well, I couldn't have been 100% sure, but the vast majority of problems that we find, especially white line issues, are going to be on the medial claw, or that inside claw of the front feet, and it's going to be on the lateral claw, or the outside claw of the back feet. That's where the pressure that is applied to these claws, the majority of the pressures are applied on those two claws. And since these are pressure-related problems, it stands to reason that that's where we would find the problems. Once again, the majority of the problems are going to be there. Not always, but I'm going to focus on that medial claw first. If anything jumps out there, that's of course where I'm going to attack. Now that we've gotten this claw cleaned up and can get a better look, yes, this is almost certainly going to be where the issue is. Now, how do I know that this is an internal pressure type problem and not something that happened exterior, something that poked through this sole? See that little bit of redness in there? That's the dead giveaway. That redness, that's happening on the inside of the claw. That's caused by some hemorrhaging that was deposited in that hoof horn when that hoof horn was grown months ago. So as that hoof horn is deposited, as that corium produces that new layer of hoof horn, if there's a problem going on at that corium level, we're going to see that in that hoof horn that's been produced. Now, over time, once that gets exposed to the outdoors, that is when it becomes problematic. You can see that little red dot there. That is actually where the lesion is going to be. But as that hoof grows out, that's where that bottom mark is. You'll see that it's kind of following its way up that foot, and eventually they're going to come together to right where that lesion is underneath. And there we have hit pay dirt, or pay juice as it were. Now this is another clear sign that this is a pressure-related problem and not a puncture. Had it been a puncture, we would have expected that area or that lesion to be directly under that first black mark we found. However, it didn't. It ended up way up this claw, and that's because, like I said, as this mark had grown out over time, that's what made it lower on the hoof. Here you can see that pocket of infection. That's the area we got to clean out. And it doesn't take long, actually, for a little guest to show up. Now, while we may think this is not some delicious stuff, this fly, well, he would argue otherwise. This time of year, they're aggressive. They have a last few months of life left, so whenever they get the chance, they're feeding on whatever they can.
What would make it go so bad so fast?
That was the farmer trying to figure out how a cow who was perfectly fine one day could almost not make it back in from the pasture the very next day. And the reason that is because of the pressure that builds up inside there. Even though this flaw was there for months, and even though it wasn't causing any problems for those months, once that corium became exposed to the outdoors, to the slurry and the mud and stuff, that was able to get inside there. The infection started to build, that pressure started to build, and then it became unbearable for her to walk on. That's what happens with these. Even though once we get this opened up, you're going to say, man, how could we have not seen this sooner? It's because they don't show it sooner. A lot of times you won't know anything is there until they start to show that lameness, and that's when we find these things. It may be hard to believe for owners that may not have hooved animals, but if you've had a horse, if you've had a goat, if you've had a cow, and they get lame, you know that this is the case. One day they're perfectly fine, the next day they can't hardly walk, and you're convinced that there must be something stuck in there. Something has changed immediately, overnight, for this to happen. And in reality, the only thing that has changed is that it takes time for that bacteria to get in there and cause the problem. That's what's happened here. The bacteria got in, that corium became inflamed, pressure started to build, and she no longer wanted to walk on it. And now the task is clear. We got to remove any of the remaining loose hoof horn, and we got to thin the margins all the way around this lesion. That's just going to make that hoof more pliable and reduce any chances of pinching in and around that area. Then we're going to thoroughly clean that, and we're going to let her out and see if we've changed the way she's walked. As we move in here, you can see how discolored that corium is on the right-hand side there. That's where that salicylic acid is really going to come into play. It's going to help slough away or exfoliate that particular area. The corium on the left, that's healthy. The corium on the right, we need to get that all cleaned up so it can start to produce hoof horn again. I'll bet you when we come back and look at this as a recheck, we're going to have good hoof growth on that left-hand side, but we may still have some work to do on the right-hand side, just because that corium is going to be delayed in producing new hoof horn. It needs to first become healthy before it can do its job. This cow was heavily favoring this right front foot when she came into the chute, and it's no wonder why. Look at how deep these heels are. The problem is going to be right here. let's get started. Welcome back to Nate the Hoof Guy. Now, how many of you are thinking right now, why don't you just spray that entire area off before you start? Spray the whole foot off, scrub it clean. Well, there are multiple reasons why I'm not going to do that, least of which today is the fact that it's 10 degrees out. Now, what do you think would happen if I started spraying a lot of water in 10-degree weather? That's right, we'd have ice everywhere, and ice is extraordinarily dangerous for cows for obvious reasons. A large animal to fall would cause potentially broken bones, who knows? Dislocated hips. Obviously, we do not want that to happen. In fact, I go through great pains to make sure that there are no areas that they might slip around my chute. You notice on the floor here on this farm, we use straw, put it in and around my trailer. That's going to soak up any liquids that might freeze, and then keeps the floor from being slippery. On a lot of farms, I may use sand, or I might also use sawdust. All for the same reasons. I want to soak up as much liquid as I can so it doesn't freeze to the floors. Now, I know you might see guys in other hoof trimming videos spray off the feet. I can promise you, on a daily basis, they're not doing that. They might do it for the videos, but it's just not common practice. And you're going to see why here in a little bit. As I clean this hoof off with my grinder, it's going to be way cleaner than I could have ever gotten it with a water hose. Not to mention the fact that even if I did wash all these feet, and I could wash these feet, mixing water with power tools and sharp knives is not a wise thing. One of the most serious injuries I've gotten while trimming was due to the fact that my gloves were soaking wet, my knife slipped and went into my thumb. So, for those reasons, I don't wash feet. And the other reason is you'll see right now. Even if I had washed this foot, I couldn't possibly have gotten into all those crevices up inside that claw, which is where the actual problem is. I got to get all that removed, then I can get this thoroughly cleaned, and I'll do that at the end. Yes, that is this cow making that noise in the background. Well, and some calves as well. But all that is she's just anxious about being in the chute. She doesn't know what's going on. At least that's my thought. Or maybe it's because her friends out the front are making fun of her. I don't know, but I can't speak cow, so I couldn't tell you. But that's a possibility. Don't rule it out. But in all seriousness, it's nothing that I'm doing that's making her do that. It's just the fact that she's in the chute. You'll notice at the end, even when I'm done with all the trimming, she's still making that noise. So what exactly is this? Well, this is a white line defect. What does that mean? Well, it's a defect in the junction between the solar horn, the part on the bottom of her foot, and the wall horn, which is on the outside edge of her hoof. Two different types of hoof, they meet at that junction, and that's a common place for flaws to happen. When those flaws happen, it allows bacteria to get in there, and then you get areas of inflammation and infection, and that's what we got here. Now, what we've got is two areas of dermatitis now inside there. That's not from two individual defects. What likely happened was that bottom mark is where this started, where there was a defect. As that horn then released to try to alleviate that problem, digital dermatitis was able to colonize on that exposed corium, and that's why we've got actually two different pockets or two different areas here that look to be exposed to that. It's not two different individual problems. It's one problem that ended up being two different lesions in the end. You can see we've got all of that loose horn removed, and even now, still spraying on this, there's still debris coming out of that. That's why you couldn't possibly get this clean at the beginning. That's why I wait till the end to do that. Now, yes, she does need a block on that other claw, so we're going to get that on now. Then we'll go back and we'll clean that area out some more. There's still a little bit of loose edges inside there I got to clean out. We'll zoom in and give you a good look at that once we get this block on. I put some glue on the side of that hoof as well before I put that block on. You'll see why when I put this foot down. Here you can get a good look at those two areas. That one up above, I've still got some more work to do on that yet. I put that block on now just to give it more time to set. When the temperatures are colder, it takes more time for that block